What happens when a public health hearing suddenly turns into a political trial? In this explosive moment from Congress, a Democratic lawmaker confronts Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. over a rising measles crisis, disputed vaccine guidance, and decisions she says have made America less safe. But this is not just another tense exchange in Washington, because halfway through the hearing, the questions stop sounding like oversight and start sounding like an indictment. Numbers turn into accusations, policy turns into blame, and one lawmaker makes it clear she believes this is no longer about mistakes, but about accountability at the highest level.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for holding this hearing, and Mr. Secretary, it is in fact true. I come from the great state of Michigan, and as you enter your second year as our nation's Health and Human Services Secretary, I just had a few things I wanted to tick through with you here today. So in early 2025, after your confirmation, measles cases spiked in the United States to the highest level since 1991. Last year, we had over 2,200 cases in America. 3 people died, 2 were children. Do I have that correct? Because according to the CDC and the American Academy of Pediatrics, I do. During this same time,
that epidemic started before I came
during
into
this
office.
same time, you questioned the effectiveness of the measles vaccine. And then in September, your hand-picked vaccine panel voted against recommending the combined measles vaccine for children under 4. This is true?
It was dangerous.
We know
that
now that
particular
over
version-
90% of measles cases in 2025 were among people who were unvaccinated or whose vaccination status was unknown. That's correct? According to the
I think
CDC,
we should have given
it
a
is.
dangerous vaccine that all the
In
science
just the first 3.5 months of 2026, the year we're in right now, we've already seen an additional 1,700 measles cases. I assume you're aware of this, according to the CDC.
There's a global epidemic.
You have also pushed vitamin A as a treatment for measles. That is correct?
Yeah, every
According
major
to
health
the America's
organization in the world
Poison
recommends
Centers,
it.
vitamin A overexposure among children increased by nearly 40%. And in this time frame, children in the hospitals with both measles and unsafe levels of vitamin A has occurred, correct?
I'm not recommending unsafe levels. I'm recommending what every
The
major
Americans-
international
America's
health
Poison
organization
Centers,
recommends.
The American Poison Centers agrees. You characterized your response to one outbreak in Texas as a model for the rest of the world, even as the number of measles cases climbed. As Secretary of Health and Human Services, have you ever taken steps to undermine medical guidelines rooted in science? Because we can look at your record, sir.
Oh,
I serve on the Science Committee. At the beginning of this year, the CDC tried to slash the childhood vaccine schedule from 17 recommended vaccines to 11 before it was blocked by a judge. Hepatitis A, B, RSV, multiple vaccines were demoted. Do you dispute this charge, sir?
You think that we should recommend interventions
These
that
vaccines
have not been safety
have saved
tested?
countless lives. A 2024 study estimates that childhood vaccines have saved 1.1 million children's lives and prevented more than 500 million illnesses in the last 3 decades. Doctors, researchers, and medical experts have spent years working to not only understand illnesses, but also prevent them. Your actions restricting these vaccines have a grave impact on our country. And while you have waged war against established medical science, you've also attacked life-saving research on cancer and Alzheimer's. You have implemented measures that have raised costs, kicked families off their insurance, and made it harder to get coverage.
You're just making
devastated
stuff
rural
up.
hospitals. Look, to top it off, Mr. Secretary, I got a copy of H.R. 944. Do you know what it is? It's your impeachment articles, sir. You have abused your office, you have gutted America's public health, and you have sacrificed our leadership in medical research and innovation. Americans today are less safe under your watch. Children are dying of diseases that we thought we had eradicated. You can smirk, sir, but I answer to the people of Michigan, and they have told me you should be ashamed, you should resign, and if you refuse, Congress should remove you from office. I yield back.
The
Is that a
gentlelady's time has
question?
expired. I now recognize the gentleman from Missouri, the good Dr. Under.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you for being here. I'm glad my colleague got her little X clip there. Hopefully it'll go viral for her like she intended. Secretary, thank you so much for your work on just so many areas. But one of the things I wanted to highlight today was your work on prior authorization that was used too often to deny patients of the care they need. But I think what we're seeing, I'm a practicing physician, practice very little now that I'm in Congress, but now more and more we're seeing threats to patient access because insurance are allowing doctors to give patients the care they need, but then denying payment for those cares. And this isn't the usual, fight over physicians getting reimbursed. An example from my own specialty, I've been contacted by dozens of allergist immunologists around the country that United Healthcare is claiming to follow Medicare, dishonestly claiming to follow Medicare on allergy immunotherapy and reimbursement, allergy shots, and completely denying care for that very life-changing, reimbursement for that very life-changing treatment. Given the market power of United Healthcare, this will put this particular therapy out of business within, I would say, 6 months to a year if UHC's policy continues, for 45 million United Healthcare insured patients. So I think we need to watch that, not only the barriers to care up front, but if insurers can arbitrarily use their market power to deny reimbursement, that care will go away likewise. But, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have children with anaphylactic allergies,
Yes.
and some of them have benefited from these, these allergen
Yes.
medications. I have a son who literally lost his peanut allergy, which
Right.
every doctor told him
Yeah, that's oral
would
immunotherapy.
never happen.
Yes, that's oral immunotherapy, which is relatively new, and I don't think any insurer actually reimburses for that. But and then aeroallergen immunotherapy, pollen, mold, dust, and so on, that used to treat asthma, sinus disease, allergic diseases, is mostly what United right now is.
This is the first I've heard of it.
Yes.
So, and I have two guys who are sitting behind me, Chris Klump and Ken Callahan, who will be interested in helping you with this. Let's get them together with your staff.
I appreciate that, Mr. Secretary. And I want to commend you, and my colleague, Representative Miller, highlighted this, your work to protect kids from mutilating transgender procedures. Of course, I think most impactful, immediately impactful, was the denial of Medicare and Medicaid reimbursement to hospitals who insist on mutilating kids, despite the science, including the recent Finland study. But one thing that really just monumental development, I think, is the executive order that President Trump transmitted last January. It had a number of components, including directing the H.Res study that came out later last year, but also directed the Department of Justice to work on a bill to create strict liability for those healthcare providers who would exploit our kids with mutilating transgender procedures. I am honored to be carrying that bill in the House. It's the Chloe Cole Act Senator Blackburn is carrying in the Senate. I believe that strict liability, the ability of parents and children, young adults, to hold those who exploited them with these mutilating procedures accountable could be very impactful, just as we saw the AMA and the plastic surgeons change their position on mutilating procedures after the big verdict in New York. Do you think it's time that we be able to hold those who harm our children in this way strictly accountable?
It makes a lot of sense to me. The science is so clear that this is a harmful procedure with very little evidence of any benefits. We'll work with you on that.
No, I appreciate that. And the one talking point that these transgender doctors, I have a hard time even calling them doctors, but these quacks say is this is going to improve kids' mental health, prevent suicide.
Well, there's no evidence of that.
There's no evidence of that, and the Finland study showed that girls who are gender confused who undergo these procedures, their serious mental health issues double, and boys, they go up sixfold. So I think there's never been a good evidence, and now there's abundant evidence that we're doing more mental health harm than good.
I thank the gentleman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
By the end of this hearing, the story is no longer just about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. sitting in the witness chair. It becomes a larger portrait of what happens when public health, political rage, and institutional trust begin collapsing into the same moment. The confrontation starts with disease, data, and consequences. A lawmaker from Michigan lays out a bleak picture. Measles cases rising to levels not seen in decades, children dying from diseases that much of the country believed modern medicine had already pushed back, and a dangerous gap opening between established medical science and the people now responsible for shaping national health policy. That is where the tension begins. Not with theater, but with fear. Fear that when science becomes politicized, the public pays the price first. What gives this exchange its documentary power is the way it builds. At first, it feels like a hard but familiar oversight hearing. The lawmaker presses Kennedy on measles outbreaks, the effectiveness of vaccines, childhood immunization schedules, and the consequences of recommending vitamin A in ways she argues created new health risks for children. Each question pushes on the same central theme. If health leadership weakens confidence in proven medical guidance, what happens to the people who rely on those systems to keep their families safe? This is what makes the first half of the hearing so important. It frames the conflict not as a personal feud, but as a struggle over whether evidence still has authority in American public life. Then the temperature changes. The hearing stops sounding like policy review and starts sounding like prosecution. The Congresswoman broadens the attack far beyond vaccines, accusing Kennedy of waging war against established medical science, undermining life-saving research, raising costs, and making it harder for families to get coverage. In narrative terms, this is the turning point. The moment the scene stops being technical and becomes moral. Because now the question is no longer only whether certain decisions were wrong. The question becomes whether those decisions were so destructive, so reckless, that they cross the line from bad governance into abuse of office. And once that line is crossed, the entire hearing acquires a different energy. It is no longer a debate. It is an accusation delivered with the force of a public verdict. That is why the moment with the impeachment articles lands so hard. It is not just dramatic because the words are severe. It is dramatic because of what it symbolizes. A health secretary is no longer being challenged merely as an administrator who can defend his choices. He is being treated as someone whose tenure itself has become the issue. The lawmaker's message is unmistakable. In her view, this is not a disagreement over policy details. It is a failure so grave that resignation or removal should be on the table. In a documentary narration, that moment should feel like the room changing shape, as if a committee hearing suddenly becomes a historical artifact of a deeper fracture inside the country. But the most compelling part of the video is that it does not end in one emotional direction. Immediately after this blistering attack, the hearing pivots again. Another member speaks supportively to Kennedy, thanks him for his work, and shifts the conversation toward prior authorization, insurance denials, allergy treatment access, and later gender-related medical policy. That abrupt contrast matters enormously. It reminds viewers that Washington never moves in one voice. Even within the same hearing, one side presents Kennedy as a danger to public health, while another treats him as a reformer addressing bureaucracy and overreach. That split is what gives the clip its full political complexity. The audience is not watching a unanimous judgment. They are watching a nation's argument play out in real time through one official, one hearing, and two completely different visions of what leadership means. This is where the bigger documentary theme emerges: the collapse of shared reality. In an earlier era, a hearing like this might still have been fierce, but there would have been at least some common agreement about the facts that mattered most. Here, that common ground feels shattered. One side is invoking CDC numbers, medical institutions, and rising disease counts as proof of failure. The other side is talking about harmful procedures, insurer abuse, and reforms they believe protect children and patients. The argument is no longer only over solutions. It is over which crisis is the real crisis. Which danger deserves the spotlight? Which authorities can still be trusted? And when a country reaches that stage, every hearing becomes more than oversight. It becomes a referendum on truth itself. That is also why this video has strong retention value for YouTube. It has escalation, moral conflict, sharp quotes, institutional stakes, and a dramatic shift from scientific criticism to impeachment language. Viewers do not stay because it is merely loud. They stay because each minute raises the stakes. First, it is about measles. Then it is about vaccines. Then it is about children's safety. Then it is about whether the nation's top health official should remain in office at all. That layered structure is exactly what turns a hearing clip into a documentary-style political narrative. The viewer keeps waiting for the next threshold to be crossed. And in this video, it keeps happening. So in the end, this is not just a clip about a politician embarrassing another politician in public. It is about the price of lost trust in the institutions that are supposed to protect life itself. When disease returns, when science becomes contested ground, and when Congress begins speaking in the language of removal rather than repair, the story becomes larger than any single official sitting at that table. It becomes a warning about what happens when public health is no longer experienced as protection, but as conflict. And that is why this moment matters. Whether viewers leave seeing Kennedy as a reformer under attack or a dangerous steward of the nation's health, one fact remains impossible to ignore. America is no longer arguing quietly about medicine. It is fighting over who gets to define safety, truth, and responsibility in the middle of a real-world crisis. And that is exactly why people will keep watching, not just for the clash, but for what that clash reveals about the country itself.